Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we are going to unpack a genuinely fascinating and honestly kinda macabre piece of scientific history. We're diving into the real, gruesome flesh and blood experiments that caught the public's imagination like wildfire and directly inspired the world's ultimate gothic monster. If you've ever wondered exactly where the line between mad science and literary genius is drawn, well, you are definitely in the right place.
To get us started, I want you to think about this for a second. What on earth connects a dissected frog, a hanged criminal, and the world's most famous monster? I know, it sounds like the setup to a weird joke, right? But it's actually the very real, foundational sequence of events that birthed modern science fiction.
Okay, let's jump right into the deep end and travel back to a rather gruesome demonstration in London. The year is 1803. We've got this Italian scientist named Giovanni Aldini, and he's just secured the corpse of George Foster, a criminal who had literally just been executed by hanging at Newgate Prison. Right there, in front of a live audience of medical professionals, Aldini hooks up a massive 120-plate metallic battery to Foster's lifeless body.
And the results? They were so extreme, they shocked even Aldini himself. When they cranked up that electrical current, the dead man's jaw started to quiver. The facial muscles contorted, and get this, the corpse's eyes actually opened. Aldini later wrote that the electricity seemed, quote, almost to give an appearance of reanimation. You can only imagine the absolute terror and awe this sparked in the minds of the public. They were suddenly faced with the idea that humanity might literally conquer death.
Part 1. The Dream of Animal Electricity. So, to understand this morbid fascination, we have to transition back a few decades to see where the whole thing began.
It really kicks off in 1781 with Aldini's uncle, the brilliant anatomist Luigi Galvani. Galvani is in his lab in Bologna, just doing his thing, when an electrical spark from a nearby machine causes a dissected frog's leg to violently twitch. Boom! This was a massive revolutionary moment. Galvani came up with this concept of animal electricity. He figured this was an intrinsic biological energy generated in the brain and piped through the nerves to make muscles move. Basically, he theorized that life itself was electrical.
Which brings us to a legendary scientific rivalry. Galvani's wild findings caught the eye of another heavyweight Italian scientist, the physicist Alessandro Volta. Now, at first, Volta reproduced the frog experiments and was super enthusiastic about the whole thing. But shortly after, he became highly skeptical of Galvani's whole biological conclusion.
So, the crucial takeaway here is understanding their opposing camps. Galvani championed animal electricity, right? He believed the frog itself possessed this vital life force. Volta was like, no, it's metallic electricity. He argued the frog was just a moist piece of meat acting as a conductor, and the electricity was actually coming from the two different metals touching it. And to prove his point, Volta literally went out and invented the first bimetallic battery, the voltaic pile, in 1800.
Part 2. Aldini's gruesome public demonstrations. Following Galvani's death, his charismatic nephew stepped up to the plate to fiercely defend his uncle's legacy.
This is Giovanni Aldini. He founded the Galvanic Society and went on this highly publicized European tour. But you have to appreciate the massive, almost hilarious irony here. Aldini, the ultimate ride-or-die defender of biological electricity, actually had to use his rival Volta's metallic battery to generate enough juice for his own public experiments.
And Aldini completely escalated things. He moved way past frogs. He started experimenting on the decapitated heads of warm-blooded animals, mostly oxen and lambs. But he made some genuinely groundbreaking neurological discoveries doing this. He noticed that stimulating one hemisphere of the brain caused muscle contractions on the exact opposite side of the face.
But it wasn't just a gruesome circus act. These morbid tests had real medical aspirations. Aldini actually pioneered modern transcranial electrical stimulation. Back in 1801, he applied electrical currents to the head of a 27-year-old farmer who was suffering from severe depression. And after 6 weeks of this wild treatment, Aldini reported the guy was completely cured.
Okay, so let's circle back to that horrifying January day in 1803 with the corpse of George Foster. Aldini is up there methodically testing the body. Step 1, he applies the current to the face, and the jaw tremors. Step 2, the dead man's eyes pop open. Step 3, full-on convulsive action of the face and limbs. It seriously looked like a man springing back to life. But Aldini's goal wasn't to raise an army of the undead. He desperately wanted to prove this technique could revive drowning victims and people suffering from suffocation.
Part 3. Inspiring the modern Prometheus. The medical applications ended up being pretty limited, but the cultural impact, absolutely massive.
Look at how this timeline builds a direct chronological bridge. We go straight from Galvani's twitching frog in 1781 to Volta's battery in 1800 to Aldini's corpse reanimation in 1803. This rapid chain of events totally convinced the public that electricity just might be the spark of life itself. And only 15 years later, in 1818, Mary Shelley takes that exact scientific zeitgeist and weaponizes it to write the first true science fiction novel, Frankenstein.
If you read the novel, the character of Victor Frankenstein acts exactly like these real-world scientific revolutionaries. Just like Aldini, Victor looks at nature and sees an obsolete barrier. He actively tries to besiege the fortifications of nature. He wants to liberate humanity from disease and death using nothing but the sheer power of modern science and electrical sparks.
Part 4. A failed romantic revolution. Because ultimately, Mary Shelley's novel is definitely not a celebration of scientific hubris. It's a profound warning.
Just think about the very definition of romanticism for a second. The Romantic movement was a massive reaction against cold, sterile rationalism. It substituted it with spirit, sensitivity, and intuition. And this is exactly what Victor completely, utterly ignores. He uses this archaic alchemist's mindset, mashes it up with modern mechanics to build his creature, and totally bypasses the spiritual and emotional core that Romanticism demanded.
And you see this epic failure perfectly in the physical body of the creature itself. Victor had this incredibly narcissistic vision of designing a beautiful, heroic ideal. He cherry-picked features he thought were stunning: proportioned muscles, lustrous black hair, pearly white teeth. But because he forced beautiful nature into a grotesque experiment using slaughterhouse parts, the reality was sickening. He got a parodic romantic creature with yellow, shriveled skin and dull, watery eyes.
So Victor's revolution fails spectacularly, and here is exactly why. He managed to restart a body using mechanics, sure, but he entirely neglected the divine spark of a soul. He privileged modern machinery over spirit. He completely ignored the creature's intellectual and emotional needs, and by treating nature like some obsolete aristocrat to be overthrown, he unwittingly unchained these destructive, primitive impulses that he couldn't even begin to control.
The moment of reanimation in the book captures this absolute tragedy perfectly. Victor says, "Breathless horror and disgust filled my heart. It became a thing such as even Dante could not have conceived." That right there is the precise moment Victor realizes his supreme arrogance has turned his utopian dream into a literal, waking nightmare.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly resonant question. As our modern technoscience pushes the very boundaries of life with genetics and artificial intelligence, are we still repeating Frankenstein's fatal mistake? Are we prioritizing pure mechanics and progress over the soul, the spirit, and the ethical limits of innovation? It's a question that was born in an 18th century lab, but honestly, it's more relevant today than ever before. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this sparks some electrifying conversations.